There's a tape recording sitting in an archive at Stanford University. On it, a grown man coaches a 21-year-old college student on how to be cruel. That tape is the real story behind the most famous psychology experiment in history. Here's the story you already know. In August 1971, a psychologist named Philip Zimbardo turned the basement of a Stanford building into a fake prison. He picked 24 college students, all screened for good mental health, no history of violence, nothing unusual. He split them by a coin flip. Half became guards, half became prisoners. The plan was to run it for 2 weeks. It was shut down after 6 days. The official story is that it had to be. The guards, given uniforms and mirrored sunglasses and a badge of authority, turned cruel almost overnight. Prisoners broke down. One had to be released after 36 hours, sobbing, screaming that he could feel it inside, that he was losing himself. Zimbardo himself said he had to be talked out of continuing by his own girlfriend, who walked into the basement and was horrified by what she saw. The conclusion traveled everywhere. Ordinary people, stripped of a name and handed a uniform, will become monsters. Not because they're bad people, because the situation makes them that way. It became one of the most cited studies in the history of psychology. It's in your high school textbook. It's been used to explain Abu Ghraib, the Holocaust, workplace bullying, and every argument that starts with people are capable of terrible things given the right conditions. There's just one problem, and it's sitting in that same archive. In 2018, a French researcher named Thibault Le Texier got access to Zimbardo's original files, boxes that had sat mostly untouched for decades. Audio recordings, handwritten notes, guard logs. He wasn't trying to attack the study. He just wanted to see the raw material behind it. What he found didn't match the story that had been told for almost 50 years. The guards weren't spontaneously turning cruel. They were being coached. One of Zimbardo's own research assistants, a man named David Jaffe, walked the guard shifts personally and pushed them to be tougher. The recordings capture him telling one guard, directly, that he wasn't being harsh enough, that the study needed the guards to be more aggressive if the data was going to mean anything. That guard later became the most infamous one in the whole experiment. The one prisoners nicknamed after a strict movie character. The one whose cruelty became the centerpiece of the entire finding. He didn't discover a dark side of his personality under pressure. He was told, explicitly, what role to play. And he played it because he was being watched by the man running the study. And the prisoner who broke down sobbing after 36 hours, the one used for decades as proof of how fast the human mind collapses under this kind of pressure. Years later, he said openly that he faked it. He said he was stressed and wanted out, and realized that a breakdown was the only thing that would get him released early, so he performed one. He said it convincingly enough that Zimbardo believed it completely and used it as one of the study's central pieces of evidence. This wasn't an accident buried in the footnotes. It was the entire structure of the thing. Zimbardo wasn't a neutral scientist watching what people naturally became. He was the prison superintendent. That was his actual title in the experiment, not a metaphor. He ran daily briefings with his guards. He set the tone. He shaped the outcome he was measuring while calling it observation. So why did the myth survive for almost 50 years before anyone checked? Because it told a story people wanted to believe, for two very different reasons. For some people, it was comforting. It meant cruelty isn't really about you, it's about circumstance. Which means you could never become that guard as long as you avoid that basement. For institutions and historians trying to explain real atrocities, it offered something almost worse, an excuse. If ordinary people just become monsters under the right conditions, then maybe the people who ran actual prisons, actual camps, actual chains of command, weren't fully choosing what they did either. The Stanford Prison Experiment didn't just explain cruelty, it quietly let it off the hook. Real replication attempts make this even clearer. When the BBC ran a version of the same setup in 2002, with actual scientific oversight and no one directing the guards toward cruelty, the guards didn't turn tyrannical. They became uncomfortable, uncertain, and mostly refused to enforce the rules. The prisoners ended up organizing and taking more control of the situation than the guards did. Same setup. No coaching, completely different result. That's the part that should actually unsettle you, more than the original study ever did. It's not that ordinary people will always become cruel when given power. It's that cruelty, when it does show up, is usually being directed by someone standing just outside the frame, someone telling you what's expected of you, someone measuring whether you'll comply. The guard in the mirrored sunglasses wasn't revealing his true self. He was following instructions from a man with a clipboard who needed a specific outcome to write a specific paper. Think about how that changes the question you're actually supposed to be asking. It's not, what would I become if given power? It's, who is standing behind me, telling me what my role requires? Every real historical horror this experiment has been used to explain had exactly that. Someone giving orders. Someone measuring compliance. Someone deciding what doing the job well was supposed to look like. That tape sitting in the Stanford archive isn't just a footnote to an old study. It's the entire experiment, told honestly for the first time. Not a story about how fast good people turn bad. A story about how easily people will perform whatever role they're told is expected of them, especially when someone with authority is standing there, watching and waiting to see if they'll comply. The guards were never becoming monsters on their own. They were being directed the whole time. And somewhere in an archive at Stanford, the recording of that direction has been sitting there for 50 years, waiting for someone to finally press play.